Lot and his daughters in biblical times. Narrative, context, theology, and ethical interpretation. The story of Lot and his daughters, recorded primarily in Genesis 19, stands as one of the most complex and morally troubling narratives in the Hebrew Bible. Set against the dramatic destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the account intertwines themes of divine judgment, hospitality, kinship, loyalty, moral compromise, and human survival. While brief in its biblical presentation, the episode has generated centuries of theological debate, ethical reflection, and literary analysis. Lot is introduced as a relative of Abraham, a man who benefits from proximity to righteousness, yet repeatedly demonstrates moral ambiguity. His daughters, unnamed in the biblical text, emerge only near the narrative's end, playing a decisive role in actions that shape Israel's later geopolitical and theological landscape. Their decision to intoxicate their father and conceive children by him gives rise to the nations of Moab and Ammon, two peoples who become persistent adversaries of Israel. This essay examines the story of Lot and his daughters within its biblical, historical, cultural, and theological context. It will analyze the narrative structure of Genesis, the ancient Near Eastern worldview regarding family, survival, and honor, and the ethical tensions raised by the account. Rather than simplifying the story into moralistic conclusions, this essay seeks to understand why the narrative exists, what it communicates about humanity and God, and how it functioned within the broader theological framework of ancient Israel. Lot in the patriarchal narrative. Lot's origins and relationship to Abraham. Lot first appears in Genesis 17 as the son of Haran and the nephew of Abram, later Abraham. After Haran's death, Lot becomes part of Abram's household and accompanies him from Ur of the Chaldeans to Haran and eventually to Canaan. This association is significant. Lot's prosperity, safety, and social standing derive directly from his relationship with Abraham. In the patriarchal world, kinship bonds were essential for survival. Extended families functioned as economic units, defensive alliances, and religious communities. Lot's inclusion in Abraham's household places him within the covenantal orbit, though he himself never receives the covenant promises directly. The separation of Abraham and Lot. Genesis 13 records a pivotal moment. Conflict arises between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot due to limited resources. Abram, exercising humility and leadership, allows Lot to choose first. Lot selects the fertile plain of the Jordan, near Sodom, described as well, watered everywhere like the garden of the Lord. Tridin. This decision is both practical and symbolic. While Lot chooses visible prosperity, Abram remains in the land promised by God. The narrative subtly contrasts faith-based obedience with self-interested pragmatism. Lot's choice sits close to moral danger, foreshadowing later events. Sodom and Gomorrah, historical and moral context. The cities of the plain. Sodom and Gomorrah were part of a group of cities located in the Jordan Valley, traditionally associated with extreme wickedness. While archaeological identification remains debated, the biblical narrative portrays these cities as wealthy, urbanized centers marked by moral corruption. Genesis 13:13 states plainly, "Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord." This characterization prepares the reader for divine judgment, but does not yet specify the nature of their sin. The sin of Sodom, beyond simplification. Genesis 19 describes the attempted sexual assault of angelic visitors by the men of Sodom. However, later biblical texts, e.g. Ezekiel 16:49-50, emphasize additional sins: arrogance, neglect of the poor, and social injustice. In the ancient Near East, hospitality was a sacred duty. Travelers depended on local protection, and violations of hospitality were considered grave offenses. The sin of Sodom, therefore, encompasses violent inhospitality, abuse of power, and collective moral decay. Lot as host and moral actor. Lot's hospitality. When two angels arrive in Sodom, Lot insists they stay in his home rather than the city square. Jenny. 19:1-3. This insistence suggests his awareness of Sodom's dangers and his adherence, at least, partially to traditional hospitality norms. Lot's actions contrast sharply with the city's behavior and indicate that he retains some moral integrity. This is later affirmed in 2 Peter 2:7, which refers to Lot as righteous, though deeply distressed by the lawlessness around him. The offer of his daughters. The most disturbing moment occurs when Lot offers his virgin daughters to the mob in place of the visitors, Gen 19:8. This act has generated intense ethical debate. In the ancient context, protecting guests could be prioritized even above family, yet the offer remains morally indefensible. The narrative does not commend Lot's action. Rather, it exposes the corrosive effect of prolonged exposure to a corrupt society. Lot's sense of moral order has become distorted. Divine judgment and deliverance. Abraham's intercession. Genesis 18 presents Abraham interceding for Sodom, negotiating with God over the number of righteous persons required to spare the city. This episode underscores divine justice, tempered by mercy. Lot's rescue can be understood as an answer to Abraham's intercession rather than Lot's own righteousness. Genesis 19:29 explicitly states that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the catastrophe, the destruction of Sodom. The destruction itself, fire and brimstone from heaven, symbolizes total judgment. In ancient literature, such imagery conveys divine sovereignty and irreversible condemnation. But Lot's wife looks back and becomes a pillar of salt, Gen 19:26. Her fate emphasizes the danger of lingering attachment to a corrupt past. Life after Sodom, isolation and fear. From Zoar to the cave, initially permitted to flee to Zoar. Lot later abandons the city out of fear and settles in a cave with his daughters, Jenny. 1930, this retreat marks a complete reversal. From urban life to total isolation. Caves in biblical literature often symbolize marginal existence, vulnerability and separation from society. Lot's fear suggests lingering trauma and a loss of confidence. In human communities, the daughters' perspective. The daughters believe they are the last survivors of humanity. There is not a man on earth to come into us after the manna of all the earth, Gen 1931. Whether this belief is literal or exaggerated, it reflects profound despair. In a patriarchal society, a woman's survival was tied to marriage and offspring. Without descendants, their family line and their own security would end. The incest narrative, cultural and ethical analysis. The plan and its execution. The daughters devise a plan to intoxicate their father and conceive children by him. The text emphasizes Lot's ignorance. He did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Gen 1933-35. The narrative assigns agency to the daughters, not Lot. This detail complicates moral interpretation and shifts focus to survival strategy rather than mutual consent. Incest in the ancient world. While incest is prohibited in later Mosaic law, Leviticus 18, patriarchal narratives often depict morally ambiguous family relationships, e.g., Abraham and Sarah as half-siblings. The absence of immediate divine condemnation does not imply approval. Biblical narrative frequently describes actions without endorsing them, allowing consequences to speak for themselves. The birth of Moab and Ammon, etymology and meaning. The sons born from the incestuous unions are named Moab, from father, and Ben-Ami, son of my people. These names preserve memory of their origins and function as etiological explanations for later ethnic identities. Israel's relationship with Moab and Ammon. Moabites and Ammonites appear repeatedly in Israel's history, often as adversaries, judges, kings, prophets. Deuteronomy 23 restricts their inclusion in Israel's assembly. The narrative thus serves a theological and national function, explaining foreign hostility through morally compromised origins common in ancient historiography. Literary structure and narrative purpose. Decline motif. Lot's story follows a downward trajectory. Prosperity with Abraham. Settlement near Sodom. moral compromise within Sodom, traumatic escape, isolation and incest. This structure contrasts sharply with Abraham's upward journey of faith. Irony and reversal. Lot attempts to preserve social order in Sodom, yet loses his family integrity. The city's destruction saves him physically, but leaves him morally and socially ruined. Theological themes, righteousness and association. Lot's righteousness is derivative, not proactive. His survival depends on Abraham's covenant relationship with God. The story warns against passive righteousness, judgment and mercy. God's willingness to rescue Lot demonstrates mercy, but the lingering consequences emphasize that deliverance does not erase damage caused by moral compromise. Human agency in a fallen world. The daughters' actions highlight human attempts to secure survival apart from divine guidance, resulting in morally tragic outcomes. Ethical reflections and modern interpretation. Avoiding simplistic moralism. The story resists easy moral categories. Neither Lot nor his daughters function as heroes or villains. They are deeply flawed humans responding to extreme circumstances, trauma and decision-making. Modern readers may interpret the daughters' actions through the lens of trauma psychology. Having witnessed violence and destruction, their worldview is shaped by fear and urgency. Narrative as warning. Ultimately, the account functions as a cautionary tale about gradual moral erosion, the cost of compromise, and the long-term consequences of choices made without trust in God. The story of Lot and his daughters is among the most unsettling in the Bible, precisely because it refuses to sanitize human behavior set within the broader patriarchal narrative. It explores the consequences of living on the margins of righteousness, close enough to benefit, but too distant to be transformed. Lot's journey illustrates the dangers of moral accommodation, while his daughters' actions reveal how fear and isolation can distort ethical judgment. The births of Moab and Ammon demonstrate that personal decisions reverberate through history, rather than offering moral comfort. Genesis presents a stark portrait of humanity's struggle between survival and faith. In doing so, it affirms a central biblical truth. Divine mercy may rescue individuals from destruction, but it does not nullify the profound responsibility of moral choice. The ultimate moral warning, the story of Lot and his daughters, is not meant to inspire imitation, but reflection. It warns against choosing comfort over conviction, confusing survival with righteousness, allowing fear to govern ethics, living on borrowed faith. Above all, it teaches that where one chooses to dwell physically, morally, spiritually shapes who one becomes. Final moral summary. The central moral lesson of Lot and his daughters is this: a life lived too close to corruption may survive judgment, but it will rarely escape its scars.